Compliance with the Open Public Meetings Law, I wish to state that on September the 22nd, 2017, the notice of this meeting of the Upper Township Committee was posted on the official Township Bulletin Board, mailed to the Cape May County Gazette, the Atlantic City Press, the Ocean City Sentinel Ledger, the Herald Times, and filed with the Township Clerk. Tonight's meeting is being video recorded up until the closed session portion of this meeting and will be available on UTTV Channel 97 and on the Upper Township website. I hereby direct that this announcement be made a part of the minutes of this meeting. I'd ask all to rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Barbara, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Barr?
Here.
Mr. Coggins?
Here.
Mr. Corson?
Present.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mayor Palumbo?
Here.
All members are present.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the open session minutes and the closed session minutes from September 11, 2017?
Motion approved. Second.
All right, is there any omissions, revisions, anything, or something missing that you'd like to add? Hearing none. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried with all in favor.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything for us this evening?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and committee members. A few things this evening. First of all, on September 19th, as you know, Mayor, we conducted a pre-storm windshield survey of Strathmere. Actually, between tides, the more severe tide, as we all know, was later on in the evening. Just to get an idea of the overall impact of Jose, thank goodness, although we did have some flooding on the barrier island, we were spared a great deal with that particular storm event. But following that event, we looked at several areas of cleanup along Strathmere Island and also around our the beachfront, around the lifeguard stand and whatnot, securing a lot of the equipment there. Part of the end of this season ritual, but our Public Works Department went through there and, like I said, secured a lot of the items there and went to many of the boat ramp locations and whatnot, clear off the debris and seagrass and things of that sort. And we're keeping an eye on that because obviously now that we have debris off the coast, but that looks like it's going to go out to sea. Thank goodness. Due to the wave action and the tidal influx, there could potentially be other areas where we just need to keep an eye on it this week.
Thank you for chauffeuring me around.
Yes. I wanted to, just for a public service, we've added our new brush collection for the township starting in October to our Upper Township website, and it has all the requirements and the policies that we would like to request the residents to ensure that they follow regarding brush collection. That's all listed. There was one other issue we wanted to, basically, the administration wanted to bring to the committee's attention as far as taking into consideration, and that is the opening of the 2016 bond for realignment of funds, specifically for our new building code construction official, a new truck, and also for a communication system for our emergency management. Basically, I'll kind of defer to Barb as far as pricing for those three projects, and then I'll interject in between needing information relative to those two particular projects.
What Scott is requesting is that the 2016 bond be repurposed. We have the funds available in the bond, however, we do not have the specific purposes correct. If you recall, earlier in the year, we had to replace our engineer's vehicle because his vehicle all of a sudden was declared unsafe. So funds that we were going to use for a construction vehicle were used for engineer's vehicle. We still need a construction vehicle. That vehicle is quite old and beginning to be in the shop more than it's available. So the funds are there, excess funds are there in the purchase of equipment section of the bond. I just need the bond to specifically say that we need to purchase an additional truck. And then as far as the emergency management section of the bond, those funds are there as well for the communications equipment. It was purposed for a pod runner, which is a shelter type vehicle. The trailer, that will not be used. It's not needed, but this communication equipment is needed. So that's where the request is. Funds are there, it's just that we need to specifically say what we're using those funds for.
So are you going to, the construction vehicle, is that going to be a pickup truck or is that going to be one of those Explorers?
At this point, we were initially looking at a pickup truck, but if we can get the same package deal or a lesser package deal, we would prefer to look for the Explorer type vehicle.
Just so you know the process, to remind you, you may already be aware of it, the bond is an ordinance, so the ordinance would need amending just to allow the identification of these items in it, and then you would have to then decide what to go out to bid or purchase off the state contract, and that's a separate approval after the bond's ordinance is amended. It's a two-step process.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
I didn't
Don't finish, it's just tell them the process.
The reason why we don't have more information is because at the end of last week, we have a new co-op that we found out about through our finance department. So we want to entertain that and see if there is a less expensive option for the package deal that we're looking for the vehicle.
So the request is really, if you feel the request is warranted, we just need direction to amend the bond ordinance and hopefully put it on the next agenda.
Any discussion from anyone?
I think it's probably time to replace the vehicle. It's pretty ragged. I think it was purchased in 98 or 99, if I remember right.
Getting 20 years out of any vehicle is pretty good. So is that a motion to approve the
Yes.
the redrafting of the ordinance for the next meeting?
Yes.
To introduce it?
Second.
Would you call the roll?
Okay. Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Fortson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Plummer?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Protection One, which is an ABT subsidiary, and our new vendor, our most recent vendor for our security system throughout Township Hall, and also the community center. We just completed as of today all the work for that project. We've upgraded all of our PFOS systems in both of those facilities, and happy to say that there's some new features that are going to provide a little bit ease of use for a lot of our members here to be able to, especially after hours meetings and things, to be able to secure and unsecure some of the doors and put them on schedules and things of this sort. So a little bit higher tech software solution there, and I think it's going to be good for all of our employees and community as well. Moving forward. We have 20 of 40, and I think that number has gone up as of today because they were putting more of the commercial recycling dumpsters out. They've been delivered to our businesses, so 20 of 40, and this was, like I said, as of Thursday last week, but I know they were putting more out today. So that number is a little bit higher, so I'm pleased to let you know that Public Works has been putting those dumpsters out, getting them out to the individuals that have requested, the businesses that have requested. Communications, we will be adding on October 2nd a new repeater to the New Jersey American Water Tower below that site in Strathmere. This tower, we've been working on this project with the FCC and our communications consultant, Mike Bailey. This repeater will basically replace the repeater that we had in our rescue squad, behind our rescue squad building here. The repeater served to service the Upper Township Beach Patrol, And so basically that repeater has reached its life expectancy. So we are replacing that and moving it onto Strathmere Island because that's going to enhance communications overall for our beach patrol. They've been having problems in past years with different issues, and that's going to correct that whole situation. Plus, it'll give some enhancements to Strathmere Fire and also our Public Works Department once it's finally configured on the off-season time periods during the winter months and whatnot. So I think, again, that's another enhancement for our communications pursuits that we're making for communications. And I think that is just
Okay, thank you. Barbara?
I just have one announcement to make. I just wanted to announce that our next committee meeting will be on Tuesday, October 10th, 7:30. And that's all I have this evening, sir. Thank you.
Daniel?
We do have a number of contract negotiation and litigation matters for closed session, plus safety and security. I did want to mention a couple things that were brought up by our code official, Dory Cooper. He actually alerted or made a request to Scott, our administrator, and then I spoke to Dory about it. There's two things that he thinks that may warrant review, and I'm going to suggest that if you agree that these items be sent to the Planning and Zoning Board for review, comment, and recommendation. The first one is an issue we had earlier in the year, and that is piling installation. He thinks that there should be some monitoring of that, prior notice going out. I know the planning board is working on some ordinance amendments, and it might not be a bad idea to take a look at that at the same time, if you haven't done so already.
We're still in the process, so this would be timely for that to be added.
And then the second issue, it may not be an ordinance issue, but it certainly is something the zoning board should be aware of. There's an issue as to when a remodel renovation is no longer really a remodel and renovation, it's a new building. Generally, it was the practice when I was a board solicitor to ask for a demolition plan that shows what's remaining and what's staying, and apparently there might have been some plans submitted that not much of the supposed remodel remained. So Dory has concerns about interpreting that and enforcing, expressing it correctly, Scott?
Yes.
So I think that should be, again, sent to the zoning planning board for review, comment, and recommendation. There may be appropriate for, even when it doesn't go to a board, to have, if it's a remodel, to request a demolition plan as well as part of the permit package. And that would be an ordinance revision if we did that. Otherwise, it would just be a case-by-case by the zoning board putting conditions on it. So if you...
So do you need a motion?
I would like a motion that those two issues be directed to the zoning and planning board for review, comment, and recommendation.
So moved.
I'll second it. Let's call the roll.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Plummer?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
And nothing further.
Okay. Paul?
Thank you. Just want to report on a couple of things. The asbestos abatement project at the Old Town Hall, I did get the specifications and plans from our consultant. Hope to have those drafted into into our standardized forms, and then put them out for the rest of the staff to review for technical completeness, and hopefully within the next 2 weeks have that project ready to go out to bid process. Been met with Public Works to do the investigation and doing some rehab at the rescue squad for their septic system. I'll have the plans done this week, and hopefully we'll get some quotes for some contractors to get that work completed. Hopefully within, by the end of October, to be able to have a scheduled contractor in there to do that work and get that fixed up. And then I just want to report, we've been working with Scott on in several municipalities in the county regarding a FEMA flood mitigation grant to raise severe repetitive loss or impetitive loss for substantial damage properties throughout the township. I sent out notices to over 30 property owners that were eligible for this grant, and I did get 4 applications back from those respondents. So we've submitted that documentation, and the consultant's reviewing that, and hopefully that application will go up to the state later probably next week, and then we'll be ready for submittal to the FEMA by the November 14th deadline.
Paul, when you say a grant for homeowners who have experienced repetitive loss, is this
Yes.
a grant that actually goes to the homeowners for repairs, or is this a grant to the township in some way?
It's actually, we're just a sub-grantee. It's really the property owners, but it's a reimbursement grant process.
Okay.
In other words, they become eligible by being on this list because FEMA's, the National Flood Insurance Program, has identified them as a severe repetitive or repetitive loss property. Once we get awarded the grant, then we get more formalized contracts and documentation from the homeowner. They get their approval to go ahead. They get the work done. They raise their house. They get a survey and a flood elevation certificate certifying that they've raised the house. They then submit all of their documentation, receipts, and that certification information to us. We pass it along, and then it gets submitted into the state and FEMA for reimbursement, and then the homeowners at varying percentages. It's like a tiered system based on severe repetitive losses 100%, repetitive losses at 90% reimbursement, and a substantial damage is 75% reimbursement. So, and then they would be reimbursed after they've shown that they've paid and had the work completed. And that's all I had for this evening.
Barbara.
I have nothing this evening.
Mr. Coggins.
Nothing to report this evening.
Mr. Young.
I met with baseball last week and went over some of the things that are Amanda's field and went over the design of the press box. They are willing to contribute pretty substantially toward the cost of the foundation and everything for it, with the hope that we can get moving forward with it so that we can get the final grade and topsoil and seed down. They're concerned again that they open their season in March, and we're heading into October, and there's still a substantial amount of work down there. And this is the same thing that happened to us last year. December, January, and February were unworkable months for us. So, whatever additional help we can get down there, Scott, to a lot of the area around the outside the fencing needs to be cut down about an inch. We have to make sure that the playing field is higher than the outside area for drainage. And they're also buying all the appliances for the refreshment stand. So we need somebody to run a gas line. Because I think it's already stubbed, but we have to run it to where the stove is going to be. They are willing to work with us financially on all these projects.
But we're going to need to run a gas line in the building, we're going to need a New Jersey licensed plumber.
Gas line's already rent.
Or what?
It's all there.
Just to hook it up?
All it is put the flex line to it and hook it to the stove. So whether we need a licensed plumber, I don't know, but Scott will have to figure that out. Okay? Again, the Fall Fest and the Pumpkin Run, I want to thank Barb's office for manning the phones and really going overboard with helping us organize this and getting all the notices out. But we're going to have a meeting tomorrow at 10:30, right?
Yes.
Or is it tomorrow or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
I'm sorry. Wednesday at 10:30. And then we are also scheduling a vendors meeting that'll be open to anybody that's going to be a vendor to come in and make sure that everything's working and where we need to be. I also needed to make sure, I'm not sure when we're going to turn the irrigation off at Amanda's, but at least 4 or 5 days prior to the event, I'd like to get it shut down. So that if we do have any rain, the field will drain a lot better. And the other thing I have is a gate. We need a gate at Amanda's field to stop the people from parking out by the ball fields. So I would like to bring it right off the end of the Little League field and have a swing gate there or a sliding gate, whatever. But if we're going to seed it, right now everybody's driving back there and parking there for the games. And if we don't get this seeded within the next few weeks, we're going to miss the boat again.
And on that issue, I talked to Roy, I talked to him on Friday, and also John, and we also discussed it today, so I know some of that work started today.
Yeah, I was out there today, and John was working on it, so,
And they were also looking at the scoreboard issue as well. I don't know if they spoke to you about that, but there's.
I know that has dimmers on it, we're gonna try to dimmer
Yeah,
it.
there's like 9 different settings for that.
If not, we'll have to work on some kind of, maybe a cover or something that goes over top of it. We put the scoreboards in dead center field, and not thinking about the lights being so bright that when the pitcher's pitching, the umpire and the catcher and the batter is having a hard time seeing the ball come out of the hand of the pitcher. And one of the umpires made a comment about it, so I went out and researched it.
Can't they wear sunglasses?
Yeah, I wish.
It's right where his
You know,
hand comes down.
we can't move the signs. I mean, the amount of concrete we have in these scoreboards is ridiculous. So we're looking to do something either with a colored lens or something that will make it amber or red and take away the glare. But something that was unforeseen and nobody knew that the scoreboards are going to be this bright. So we're going to make that correction. And we're still looking for volunteers. Anybody would like to help work the Fall Fest and Bandits and the Pumpkin Run? We're definitely looking for volunteers to help us with that. So
And the date is November 4th.
November the 4th. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and goes to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The field will open at 5 o'clock for vendors. And I would imagine by 6:30, 7 o'clock, we'll have street rods lined up waiting to come in. So it's going to take quite a few people to make sure it's done properly. That's it.
Mr. Barr.
Nothing to report.
Curtis.
Thank you,
Mr. Corson.
Mayor. At this time, I have nothing.
Me neither. All right, let's move on.
The resolutions, item number 1, designating the date and time for trick or treat in Upper Township, and that would be October 31st from 5 to 8 p.m.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 2, authorizing the purchase of dune fencing in the amount of $35,940 from the 2011 Capital Improvement Bond Ordinance.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 3, authorizing additional cash drawer funds in the Upper Township Municipal Court.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Horson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 4, appointing Raymond Padrier as a temporary employee to the Upper Township Construction Code Office to serve as a fire protection subcode official.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 5, approval of a payment plan for Block 573, Lot 13 on the municipal tax map of the Township of Upper.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 6, authorizing the mayor and township clerk to sign a contract with Brinkerhoff Environmental Services for asbestos safety control monitoring services.
Move the resolution. Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 7, authorizing the engineer to solicit bids for the abatement and removal of asbestos-containing material at the Upper Township Old Town Hall.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 8, appointing Louis A. Bonato as an appraiser for the Township of Upper.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 9, refund EMS ambulance billing overpayment to United Healthcare Insurance Company and Family Life Insurance Company.
Move the resolution. Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 10, authorizing the mayor to sign and submit a municipal aid grant application for fiscal year 2018.
Motion to authorize.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. And then item number 11, I believe we
Yeah,
are...
you might want to ask for a motion to table that, because I believe Scott and Barbara are going to look at maybe some less expensive vehicles.
That's correct.
Make a motion to table.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried to table that resolution. Item number 12, Chapter 159, resolution for the insertion of a special item of revenue into the 2017 budget that was not determined at the time of the adoption of the budget. New Jersey Department of Transportation Municipal Aid Program in the amount of $158,000.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 13, Chapter 159 resolution for the insertion of a special item of revenue into the 2017 budget that was not determined at the time of the adoption of the budget, Cape May County Open Space Program for the Harbor Road Bike Pedestrian Gateway Project in the amount of $500,000.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Unanimously, we all second that one. For $500,000, we'll second and third it and fourth it.
Who's going to say no to that?
I don't know. Please call the roll.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 14, urging the County of Cape May to reduce the speed limit along Commonwealth Avenue in Strathmere to 25 miles per hour.
Move the resolution for the purpose of discussion. Just want to comment, if we reduce the speed limit on Commonwealth Avenue, that will reduce or eliminate any need for rumble strips. That's why we're doing this.
But we've also simultaneously we're petitioning the county to lower the speed limit anyway.
Yeah, but that will,
And take away the rumble strips, not only there, but in other areas that are less than 50 miles an hour.
Okay. Mr.
Call the
Barr?
roll.
yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 15, tax refund for Block 306, Lot 14.02, and Block 623, Lot 4.
Motion to authorize.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 16, authorizing a notice of violation and abatement of nuisance pursuant to Township Code, Section 11-1.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 17, under ordinances. Public hearing and final adoption of ordinance number 13, 2017, and ordinance amending revised general ordinance, Chapter 18, flood damage control, and Chapter 19, land subdivision and site plan of the Code of Upper Township. The public hearing.
Okay, before I open it up to the public for the public hearing, anybody have any comments, Dan or Paul?
No, this is what was recommended or required actually by FEMA to remain eligible in the National Flood Insurance Program. All municipalities have to adopt their version of it by October 5th. It also has a minor change to clarify an existing interpretation to the site plan ordinance.
Okay. So at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Would anyone like to address the ordinance that will address flood damage control in the Township of Upper.
Dave Townsend, 14 South Bayview, Strathmere. I sent you all a letter September 23rd, and I'd like to, for the record, not read the letter, but just kind of summarize it, and also for the people here. One of the issues that Dr. Farrell mentioned is perhaps part of this situation where we got into this flood zone, or will be going into this new flood zone, is the fact that there are no bulkheads, or there are some places that don't have bulkheads along Bayview Avenue. Some years ago, and this is not during your terms, but some years ago, I had an agreement to buy 408 Bayview. There was no bulkhead there. There's still no bulkhead there. We stood out on the pier with representatives from Upper Township, as well as the state, and it was a circus. I think we should let him put a bulkhead here. I think we should let him put a bulkhead here. I don't think we should let him put a bulkhead in all. And the bottom line was, I was not allowed to put a bulkhead in. Thus, there's still not a bulkhead at 408 Bayview. And I thought I was doing the township a favor, the town a favor, to help prevent flooding. Because I was not allowed to put that bulkhead in, there's still flooding that occurs there, I guess, and if that's one of the reasons, not you, but Upper Township didn't let me put it in, so I feel that Upper Township bears some responsibility there.
So what was the time frame, approximate date? Do you have?
I think it was in the 80s, 1980s, yes. And my second point on this is, you know, this took us by surprise. I just built a new house in Strathmere. I had to deal with Cape May County, I had to deal with zoning, I had to deal with Upper Township, I had to deal with CAFRA, I had to deal with Tidelands, I had to deal with Army Corps. It would have been nice if somewhere along the line, one of these people would have said, hey, by the way, there's some possible new coastal zones, zoning coming. It would have been nice if somebody would have told me that. Dr. Farrell and I had a small conversation this evening, and I said, well, how would we have known about this? How could we have possibly known? And he said, well, you couldn't. There's probably no way you would have known unless you were informed by someone. And that brings me to my second point, being that we were supposed to be informed in April, and we weren't. So instead of having months to push back against this, as other communities did, we had days, and we're really behind the 8 ball now. So based on these two factors, at least, I think that the township should bear some responsibility. And I guess I need to ask you, no matter what the situation here is, you know, Strathmereans don't quit. You guys all know that. Will you work with us and help us politically and financially to push back against this? And what I would suggest is, I don't know what it would take, but delay this vote, because we haven't had time. You know, this is disproportionately affecting Strathmere residents. And I talked to Lobiondo's office, and they said they're trying to contact FEMA, but FEMA's rather busy right now. This is probably not high on their agenda. And I'm suggesting that if this vote can be delayed, giving us some time to look into this, do what we got to do what other communities did to hopefully change this situation. What would it take to delay this vote?
Let me just say this. I don't believe we're going to delay the vote, because that would further jeopardize all the residents of Strathmere from a flood insurance standpoint. So that can't happen tonight, or I hope it doesn't happen tonight. But I'm going to let Mr. Young, give some details. We're certainly willing to work with the residents and try and come up, maybe with a better scenario through different avenues. But I'm not so sure what you're asking from a financial standpoint.
Well, I understand what you have to do, and that you have to vote. I didn't know if you could delay it. Okay, that's fine. But just because the vote goes through, I don't think that we're going to stop. It's just probably going to be harder to get the situation changed, once the vote goes through. But again, we had no time to deal with this. We heard about it. We were here last meeting, 2 weeks ago, and, we've got days instead of months, and what can we do? And we're just looking for more time so that we can do what we have to do to see if we can have the situation change. It just seems to be disproportionate between Strathmere and the other communities.
Well, I'd like to address that if I could, the timing. There is no difference between Strathmere and Ocean City and Seattle. I haven't looked at the other communities. I'll let Dr. Farrell talk because he has been involved in other Cape May and Atlantic County communities. I don't know if you were here at the last meeting, but
I was.
I'll give an explanation. It's accurate. What happened was a change in the state law. That change in state law is what affected the coastal A zone in terms of the construction standards. And you said you recently built your house.
Yes.
What, this year, last year?
I got my CO last November.
Okay. Your house should be fine. It should be...
Well, no, my problem is, if my house burns down, I can't rebuild what I have, correct? No. Correct?
Well, if you aren't built to the stricter standards, correct, but it will be essentially I'll let Paul tell the difference between the two, but there's not a whole lot.
Yeah, the difference is, all the homes on the bay are built on piles, so that's going to stay the same. It's just whether or not within the, below the base flood elevation, the walls, instead of, if you have a traditional block foundation wall, you'd have to build breakaway walls instead of...
Well, that's a big deal. Do you want to change your house? I don't want to change my house. I just went through all this to build what I have. I'd like to keep what I have. And if I should have some kind of disaster, I don't want to have to have something different. Do you want to change your house? Probably not.
If I may continue, with the coastal A zone, Ocean City has, I'm told by their solicitor, a couple hundred properties in it. In fact, her house is in it. The areas, and they didn't fight it for the same reason we didn't fight it, and the same reason Seattle didn't fight their coastal A. They did fight their V zone along the promenade, and that was because they knew they had a problem there. The coastal communities in Cape May and Atlantic County were not aware of this problem because it didn't exist last fall, because the state decided to change the law after the appeal period for the maps. The mistake that occurred, if it did occur, frankly, was that you were supposed to be notified of what we discovered this spring, in the spring, when we discovered that your property is going to be in coastal A, and we would have this, if you rebuild or would destroy, a stricter standard. That was a mistake. The engineer was asked in April, as you know, to send out that notice, and it didn't go. Would it have affected where we are today? I frankly tell you no. It hasn't affected the people in coastal A in Seattle. It hasn't affected the people in coastal A in Ocean City. Is there a mechanism to correct and appeal? Yes. Dr. Farrell could talk about more of the specifics on that. That is part of your, request that is worthy of discussion, and frankly, there's a lot of things that have to be addressed. The current bulkhead heights have to be reviewed. We may have to change the bulkhead ordinance. It could be even more onerous on residents to get that coastal A removed, because you may have to bring, and I don't want to speak for the experts, but you may have to bring the entire bulkhead area in that section of Strathmere up to an 8-foot level. And I think they're in the middle of doing surveys of what's there, and that's a significant burden for most of the residents there. How is that going to happen? And those are the same issues that are being faced by the other coastal communities because the state changed the standard of construction. That's what happened.
All this you're telling us is happening now. It's all laid onto us now without any notice. And if we had notice, I think we probably could have looked into it a little bit more. And the Ocean City properties that you mentioned, I think if you probably look at the percentage of houses in Ocean City and the percentage of houses in Strathmere, it's a disproportionate number of houses in Strathmere that are in this coastal A zone. And if you look at the maps, which I'm sure you've done, it just goes right down the middle of the street, and most of the other communities are going down the bulkhead.
I don't know if Dr. Farrell could add, but my understanding is it's based on the geography, and that's why. There are certain areas in Ocean City that are similar to that section in Strathmere, but Ocean City is much more developed and has had the bulkhead ordinance for years, if not decades. And that's the difference. Over time, Ocean City made their people bring their bulkheads up to speed. We started doing it at the request, it was after this from Stanton, correct?
Correct.
All right, if I can get an answer to my question about how can you help us, what will you do to help us? Will you help us politically? Will you call or Congressman Lubiano, will you call the different people? If we have to get surveys, will you help us financially?
I mean, certainly from a legislative standpoint, we'll do everything we can to help you with that. I mean, that's not an issue. From the surveys and from some of the financial aspects of it, that'll have to be reviewed, because that isn't normally something that we take on that responsibility, because, you know, it's personal property. I mean, it's no different. I'm dealing with it myself. I have a home in Florida that the Irma made landfall the second time, the island that I live on, or I have a house down, you know, so it's my responsibility. It's not the town, not, you know, Marco Island's responsibility.
Well, I think I gave the information as to why I think you do have some responsibility here. You have to bear some of the responsibility is what I'm suggesting.
Why do we have to bear some of the responsibilities? I'm not, from 1980?
Because we weren't informed properly, number one.
From the 1980s?
Number two, I just gave you two reasons earlier, so.
No, you said that it was turned down by the township in the 1980s.
Yes.
That's 30 years ago.
Okay. There would have
doesn't-
been a bulkhead there, and if Dr. Farrell says one of the reasons could be that there isn't a continuous bulkhead, well, that's why there's not a bulkhead there. I wasn't allowed to put one in. So,
Well, I'm looking at the bulkhead list here. We were provided a copy of the bulkhead list and the surveys, elevations.
yeah, check out 14 South Bayview, see what elevation you got.
14 South Bayview?
Not listed.
We don't have it.
Well, there's a 14, maybe.
14 Bayview, there's no,
Did you say you owned 408?
No. I said, I had an agreement to buy 408 years ago.
Yeah, there's no-
And there was no bulkhead.
there's
I
still
wanted
no
to put
bulkhead.
one in, and I wasn't allowed to put one in, and that's why there's not one there today.
but I'm looking at this, and a couple of our street ends are,
I'm sorry?
I'm looking at the list though in the surveys, and a couple of our street ends are low. And I can tell you, if we see something, my opinion is if we have a neighbor to one of our street ends putting a bulkhead in, we should make ours up to the code of 8-foot elevation or whatever they recommend.
How about 10?
I don't know what the recommendation is 8 foot. I mean, I'm
Okay.
looking in here, I mean, like the Summer Webster Street end, it's 3.23 elevation. That's, you know, it's awful low.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The elevation. That means we need 7 more foot of bulkhead there.
On the lots that are the township.
Oh, you're saying
The township street
Street
ends. Or street ends, yes. The problem is,
But if we raise it though, doesn't, Dr. Farrell, we raise our ends and the other homes on either side don't. Won't the water rush in that way?
yes,
The letter of map revision, which is what the pathway exists now, because the revision based on the community working directly with the Region 2 FEMA is over. That's done. So now the pathway is either a letter of map revision initiated by the Township of Upper, signed off by the CEO or mayor of the township, submitted to FEMA, based on having the bulkheads now all at the required elevation, which would be a minimum of 8.0 feet NAVD 88. Then the entire strip would be revised accordingly to move the coastal area out to the bulkhead.
And just to clarify for these folks, the fact that, Paul, would you even, I would say more than 50, 60, 70% of the properties
At least
do not fit in that category based upon it's not complete data, but the limited data that we have now, whether we did it, if we knew to do it, because we didn't know it affected the coastal way, if we knew to do it last fall, or whether we do it now, what would FEMA say?
They would say that this whole process is got to go to completion before you can submit. It has to be verified by a licensed engineer or a professional surveyor as it goes in.
They're looking for that 8-foot bulkhead,
Right.
correct?
They have to be at least 8.0 for an A10 zone. A10 is the zone your homes are in along the bay shore. It's
And even some of the bulkhead, I mean, mean, this list was prepared in 2014 by Doug Gaffney, and after his, work with the Stratford residents. And the bulkheads that have been built since then, I think a couple of them have been built at elevation 7. I don't know if any of them have been built to elevation 8.
I know one. I keep telling you guys, I know one.
But as Dr. Carl said, one bulkhead out of the stretch of over 1,000 feet is not going to change.
It's a
the
very
law. It
difficult
wouldn't have
problem.
changed it today, it wouldn't have changed it a year
It's a
ago.
very difficult practical problem because this township committee is going to have to make decisions. Let's say we had a magic wand and we all had financing. That would be great. We could go in and we could build 1,000 feet of bulkhead at 8. We don't have that. We don't have the tax dollars. We just don't have it.
Let me ask you
But
that.
let me
Go ahead,
just
go
finish the
ahead.
thought. So, what happens is, when we did the ordinance, was we said, look, we need to get to the point where you are now. Those people back there need to get to that point. But we thought it was onerous on them to say, if we think you're too low, or you're in danger, or you're deteriorating, we're going to make you go in. We're going to do it right away and say, raise it up, bring it. That was a decision that the township made when they adopted that ordinance 2-3 years ago. What was it, Paul? The bulkhead ordinance?
3 years, I think.
All right, when we adopted that, so the theory was, if you substantially improve, or you get a new bulkhead, or your bulkhead fails, then you got to get up to where you are. It was thought that over time that would happen. We thought we had time. We didn't know the state was going to change the rules on us. The state changed the rules this year after the appeal period for those maps. So now it is a crisis for you folks, and it's kind of a catch-22, because if we forced all your neighbors to raise their bulkheads and do what you did, there'd be a bunch of people in the audience saying, what are you doing to me? I'm on limited income. I can't do this. So it's a very difficult situation.
And even if we had attempted with this data and gotten the survey data of all the bulkheads and appealed it during the proper appeal period, it wouldn't have passed because the bulkheads were too low. So even if we appealed it back 3 years ago, when the appeal process was eligible to be appealed, we would not have been successful in an appeal based on the current bulkhead heights and the number of bulkheads that are too low.
Is there any, with the storms and all going on, is there any kind of grant money for a project to do from the bridge to the boat ramp?
The grant money that would be potentially available is the FEMA mitigation funds, similar to what we're applying for the house properties for severe repetitive loss. The problem is, unless it's kind of a catch-22. You have to have a cost-benefit ratio of better than 1. So in other words, for every dollar you spend, you gotta save dollars in reduced insurance claims. And also be competitive. I think they had $159 million for the entire country to be spent for this grant program. So you're not only competing against other towns in New Jersey, you're competing against the entire East Coast and the rest of the nation for these FEMA mitigation grant funds. So to come up with, okay, if I'm going to put in 1,000 feet of bulkhead, now I got to show that in order to get funding, if I just put it to elevation 8, I'm not going to get, that's not going to be an eligible project because it's not going to secure property to reduce flooding at an elevation of 100 years.
Well, we wouldn't do it at 8, we can do it at 10.
You'd have to do it at 10, but then you really look at then you're still at a competitive grant process and maybe you could do it, maybe you couldn't, but then you look at, okay, now we're going to build a bulkhead at elevation 10. You really would have to look at the practicality, and this is something the planning board and this committee looked at when we adopted the bulkhead ordinance at 7, that most of the ground elevation on the back, along the bulkhead is 3 to 4. So now you're talking about wanting to go to elevation 10 with the top of the bulkhead. So you're talking about putting a 6 to 7 foot wall in everybody's backyard. And then you're talking about, okay, now I'm at the top of that, so now I got to get up to that wall, but now I have to, because everybody along that waterfront has docks to get docked boats, now I'm going to have to get down from elevation 10 down to elevation 1. You're going to need a ladder You're gonna need, so there's impracticalities of building a bulkhead up to the 100-year flood elevation. And then, FEMA may even look at it and say, well, it may knock the waves down, but when FEMA looks at it from flood mitigation, it's gonna say, are you gonna reduce the risk of flooding for a 100-year flood? Well, we can't certify that because if I stop the bulkhead at the Bayview Avenue boat ramp, everybody knows what wraps all the way around to the other side and then all the way down the back end of Prescott Avenue is the marsh that's at elevation 2.5. So there's no way that you could protect, you build a bulkhead and then the water's just gonna go around the other side of it. So, unless you secured all of that and put a wall down the backside of Prescott Avenue and then ran it down the backside of Commonwealth Avenue, maybe not all the way to Taylor Avenue, but quite a way down, enough to certify that you've built essentially a flood levee at elevation 10. And I'm sure the homes along Prescott and Whale Beach are gonna love a nice bulkheaded wall between them and the marsh at elevation 10. I mean, would it be great to do that? Yes. Would it provide flood protection so Strathmere wouldn't flood? But think about the cost of what that project is gonna be. And is it gonna meet the benefit-cost ratio of 1?
How do they calculate that ratio, Paul?
They look at, they'll take historic losses and they for that area, and so they can pull up from insurance data and pull up, okay, this area of, so we're gonna certify that we're gonna protect this certain area. We know how much losses have accumulated in this area, so I can come up, even from an estimation, it's not down to the exact, but when you're looking at those numbers, can they prevent those kind of losses based on
That are gonna offset the cost of the project, and then go beyond it.
Correct. And then that's not let alone thinking about the permitting. The township has just recently received, instituted a bulkhead requirement. So we've never, from the township perspective, regulated or permitted bulkheads. So I think the likelihood that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that there was township
Probably a state.
involvement, it was probably the state
Yes.
probably said that they couldn't build a bulkhead. So now you're looking at the regulatory standpoint of getting the regulatory permits to even do such a project.
So the Reader's Digest version is it's not practical.
Well, I think it's not practical to that we would likely get a grant to fund the bulkhead. Do I think that there's ways that we could, that a bulkhead could be built or should be built? Yes, but, you're talking about a large expenditure to get it done and it'd be borne, at cost. I don't think there's going to be any federal funding for it at this point.
So,
I mean, we can hire a consultant to look into it, but I think that, they're going to come up with that benefit cost analysis and it's not going to be favorable.
all right, so I'm just thinking out loud here, so no one panic, no one go crazy. If we were, let's just say hypothetically, that there was a decision to make where we would put the cost of putting a bulkhead on Bayview in a bond, and then assess folks, I'm not saying we're gonna do this, but a way of at least trying to help the financial burden at one time. If we were to bond it and say, you get assessed over a 10-year period or something, to pay it back, will that help to alleviate, maybe Dr. Farrell, you can answer some of the concerns about this coastal A problem on Bayview?
The coastal A exists on the map today because FEMA calculated, they ran their wave, it's called the Overland Wave Model. Its acronym is called WHAFIS, W-H-A-F-I-S. That model is the one they use to take at the base flood elevation of 10.0 for this portion of the real estate, that elevation. They then propagate waves across that surface between 1.5 and 3 foot high. If those waves can then impact the structures that are landward of whatever bulkhead exists, then they designate that as a coastal A zone to limit those waves propagate inland. Now, the houses actually knock down the waves, because the waves hit the houses, the shrubbery, any other obstacles, fences, the bulkhead too. But in order for the wave to be stopped in its tracks, that bulkhead elevation must be 8.0 feet out of 10, so the wave then breaks right there. That's the mathematics of the 1.5 foot high wave or bigger breaks at that point. Where there's 2 feet of water over the bulkhead, that'll make the wave break. If it's 9, then it's even better, but 8.0 is the mathematical limit that allows them to say, okay, the waves will not directly impact these houses immediately landward of the bulkhead. So there is your problem with the 8.0 foot high bulkhead everywhere, to provide the science to FEMA that says we can move the coastal A zone to the bulkhead and take all the houses out of it. And then you would just be in an A10 zone for static flooding, which block walls and everything else is all that is required, and flood beds and things like that. So basically that is the situation as it stands. If one person builds a 10-foot high bulkhead on their property, my experience, I can't guarantee this, my experience is that FEMA doesn't spot zone. They won't take the coastal A and go out around that property and then keep going. That doesn't happen. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I've not seen it happen very often. In fact, I don't have an example to give you where it happened. The only example I know is down in Avalon Manor, where a gentleman took a section of filled salt marsh in Avalon Manor in Middle Township, and they built an 8-foot elevation bulkhead in front of all 7 lots, preparation to sell them and have homes built on them by those who bought the lots. And it was designated a V zone because it was just salt marsh, according to FEMA. In 2008, there was no bulkhead. It was just salt marsh and then fill on the original salt marsh. And they said, well, that's a V zone because the waves can just wash in over it, no problem. The bulkhead was built in 2010, and then the maps came out in 2012. We went, the owner came to Middle Township came to me, we did the research, presented it to FEMA because the bulkhead was officially certified at 8.0 feet, it was built to a certain set of standards that qualified. They moved the V zone out to the bulkhead and left the rest as a standard A zone. Like the rest of the bulkhead parts of this portion of Avalon Manor, which had pre-existed in 2008, that had been built earlier. So that's the example I have that is exactly on point for this particular problem.
So, based on your explanation, my question is, if there was a bulkhead that ran 8 foot, say, all of Bayview, would that help to mitigate this issue?
Yes. It would be the key element that would mitigate the issue.
Do you think it would work?
I think it would work. It did at Avalon Manor. And it was exactly the same height, it was exactly the same timber bulkhead, or it could be the, Z-form plastic material, it doesn't matter.
So, getting back to what Paul said, if we had to put, and I'm not saying, I'm speaking out loud here, I'm just thinking, if there was a 5-foot addition on all the bulkheads in the backyards of many homes on Bayview, and they had to access their boat and boat ramps and those kind of things, would that mitigate this challenge to the FEMA ruling?
It would. It would. Now, there is, in Brigantine, we did one other thing, the city of Brigantine did for a very similar situation on Brigantine Boulevard. There was a fairly substantial, I think it was like 22-unit condominium with, community frontage along the beach thoroughfare. And they had 3 entrances to the docks. They had 3 big docks that went out, had a T head for the boats to be moored at for all the unit owners. And this was Ed Stinson, the municipal engineer, he and I cooked up this idea gates that would be stored somewhere close by, ordinary times. You walk through at grade, whatever the grade was to the dock, you walk through the bulkhead at grade. Storm warning, storm's coming. You brought out the pieces and dropped them into the slots and put the bolts at the top of it and walked away. Now you have an 8-foot wall.
FEMA accepted that?
Yeah, 8-foot elevation wall was okay.
Just to give you an analogous situation, in Ocean City, they have the first floor first floor commercial, where below base flood, and they had the same thing with the gates. I don't recall anybody not getting water during Sandy, even those that use the gates.
They got water through. Well, bulkheads are individual lot owners, and when the bulkhead company builds it, they stop. They don't overlap, they don't join them together. There's a gap very often between the adjacent bulkheads. And,
There's one other thing I need to mention, and Dr. Farrell, I don't know if this is your bailiwick, but Paul would understand this. I don't hold myself out to be a DEP attorney, but I have numerous clients who have built new bulkheads, and often because of what Paul said about the heights, you have to reconfigure your access to your docks and slips. All of that requires permitting. Some of it may have riparian tidelands issues, some of it may not. Often today, when you go in for a bulkhead permit, they will check to see the legality of your docks and your slips and whether or not anything was built with permits from the DEP, from CAFRA. And if you don't have all those things, it could be a mess for that property owner.
Yeah, not all the properties have riparian rates on waterworks.
So they may have to get licenses and pay a license to the state or a grant to the state, which is another one. Well, we'll give grants over docks and slip areas, flowed water now. But they, when I say if it's a man-made area, that's a former stream, they won't do it in a tideland, an existing tideland flow. That's a lease.
yes, lease only.
So, in order to try and take care of the situation and to try and help the individuals, it sounds like we have to work with them in devising a way. It's either we force everyone to change the height of the bulkhead on Bayview and do it by a bond and assess the current residents that are there over, a 10-year or 15-year, whatever we could do, period of time. And then from there, we would have to devise, it would take a lot of work, I guess, to get the permits that are needed and also to devise a system that they could access the ramps to be able to, the boats and dock that they have, lower than where the bulkhead is. It would be quite a project.
Is our new bulkhead awarded a contract for it? That's elevation 8?
The Webster Avenue bulkhead that we just awarded is being constructed at elevation 8.
Okay.
Something for us to think about, but go ahead.
Can't hear what he said, I'm sorry.
The bulkhead at Webster Avenue is being replaced this year is at elevation 8,
8, the playground?
the playground.
Good evening, Ed Teddemer from 30 Sherman in Strathmere. I have a layman's question that may be best answered by Dr. Farrell and Mr. Dietrich. Looking at the FEMA website and looking at the coastal way designation, there were two conditions that needed to be met for the coastal aid designation about wave heights and exactly what you talked about. I don't believe it mentions bulkheads. So my question is, do we know that the bulkhead is the issue for that stretch of Strathmere? And would it be worth taking another survey, our own survey, to see what data we get in case the survey or whatever data FEMA had is incorrect? Do we know, is there a chance that another survey with different transect points would make a difference? Forget the bulkheads for a minute.
Well, the whole coastal way depends a bit on the bulkhead, but you don't have to have one. Some of the lots without the bulkhead have elevations of 3.3, 3.4, and if you have a base flood elevation that's at 10, well, you got almost 6.5 feet of water during the flood, you could propagate, an 8-foot wave
Right.
in that depth of water. So it's the elevation, if somehow magically the entire Strathmere Bay Shore could be raised in physical elevation, streets, everything, to elevation 8, then the coastal A zone goes away and you would be looking at a 2-foot flood level maximum, according to the 100-year
Right.
estimate. So that's the key element, is the topography of the real estate involved. Now, the bulkhead is a barrier that man makes and puts in place to mitigate that low initial elevation of the salt marsh edge along the back shore of the barrier islands. We did put some fill out there because your backyards are at elevation 4, not 2.5. Because that's the way it was back 40, 50 years ago when they pump filled a lot of these by dredging the channels,
Right.
pump the sand onto the salt marshes to expand the width of Margate, Longport, Ventnor, Atlantic City. It's called Venice Park, I believe. They even stole the name from Italy. They had the canals. They dug the canals into the marsh and put the material that was the canal on the land and built the houses on that land. Okay, FEMA says it floods. And during major storms, you can have waves of 1.5 foot or greater impacting the structure. Concrete block and light timber walls, 2x4 walls, do not withstand even 1.5 foot waves when there's 2 or 3 feet of water in front of the house. So that's the reason for the coastal A zone designation. If there's less than 1.5 foot waves, okay, you're good as an A zone standard.
So you wouldn't hold out any hope for any other survey that would conflict with what they...
I know the area pretty well.
I know you
I'm
do.
sure that the numbers that are on that chart that Mr. Dietrich has, that was done by Doug Gaffney,
Right.
are, maybe they're off by a 10.
And well, Doug did the preparation work for the bulkhead ordinance, and we talked to him about doing another survey here, and he said, well, it's about the transect points, and it might be worth doing, but it would have been a nice fee, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I just was asked today by Stone Harbor to do just that for their entire, Bay Shore line, including all the lagoons. So there's probably 2 days worth of nothing but sit there doing GPS
Right.
over and over and over and over again, all the way around that 2.5 miles of shoreline. So, but they're doing that to assess whether they're going to go to an 8-foot elevation as a required ordinance revision, and how much of it, they want to know what's the average bulkhead height. They don't know. How many are above 5 but less than 7? How many are over 7 but less than 8? That kind of information will come out of this study.
Okay.
So,
Thank
that's what, now, Doug did some, he didn't survey all of the places.
Yeah, he probably hit 25% of the properties, maybe 30% of the properties. So, I mean, there's enough there to know that back in 2014,
Right.
which was right when the appeal period was looking at, that there was nothing there that indicated, hey, we could take a shot at that would have changed the data or the outcome.
I mean,
Okay, thank you.
this is public information, our survey, right?
Yep. Well, it's not our survey. We got this from the Strathmere residents.
But it's in your records now, that if they want a copy of
I
it.
mean, you all have a copy of this, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one copy. I'll give you my copy, and somebody, you guys can.
Did you get that the other night? The copy of the...
I'll leave, I have a copy here right there.
Thank you. Keep it?
Yeah.
I have it electronically if you want me to email it.
Yeah, if anybody wants to email me, I can email them a copy of it.
You've got it electronically, you can email it to anybody else.
All right, let's kind of bring it back here.
Good evening, committee. My name is Charles Clough. I'm a resident of 273 Marshallville Road here in Tuckahoe. I understand all the conversation about the bulkheads and the mitigation of wave propagation, but how does that affect somebody like myself as a resident on Marshallville Road here in Tuckahoe? Can somebody explain that to me more specifically?
Up on Marshallville Road, you're not dealing with the same issues that the folks on Baby Drive.
I understand that because they're talking about storm surge with the bulkheads and all, I would assume.
You have the same type of issue. There were 4 categories of changes that are happening within the flood zone map that we're looking at this evening. There's properties that are in the current flood zone that are leaving the flood zone, that no longer be in the flood hazard area. There's properties that are outside the flood hazard area that are going to be inside the flood hazard area. And that's the category that you're in. You're not, if you received a letter from my office, and I think you got one that said, you're not in flood hazard area today, but you're going to be in the A zone as part of these new flood maps. Then there was a group of people that were in a current V zone, velocity zone, that were going to be leaving the V zone and going to an A zone. And then there were some people that were in the flood, the A zone, that were, and those first 3 categories, that all affected their flood insurance premiums. You know, those were either, if you were obviously leaving the flood zone, they were going to be potentially not having to pay for a flood insurance, or the other 2, if you're not in the flood hazard area and you're going into an A zone, or if you're in a, and that's where you got to pay for flood insurance, or if you're in a V zone going into the A zone, you're going to pay less insurance. But then these folks are people that are in the A zone that are going into an overlay area that's in a coastal A zone. They're not being affected by their flood insurance rates. They're just being affected by their future construction standards on how they would have to construct their home. So for you, that is not in a flood zone currently going into a flood zone, you would have to get an elevation certificate from a surveyor to help determine what's the elevation of your house. You know, because a lot of the houses that are affected by here are right along the flood zone line. You know, so you might want to come into my office so we can look at your house individually to see how close your house is or isn't within the flood zone lines, and then, you know, I can discuss with you reaching out to a surveyor to measure how high your flood elevation is of your house, how, you know, what's the ground elevation of that. So you're not dealing with some of the same issues, but it's just you're not dealing with a construction standard end, except for you got to put in, make sure you have flood venting and that your house is elevated to proper elevation.
Well, I just wanted an explanation of how that would affect persons like myself on that particular flood map. The other question I had, well, not question, but comment that I had, the good doctor was talking about sluice gates, and the gentleman there said that a business did get flooded because, even though they had that type of gate. But I can tell you that there are engineering firms out there that make sluice gates that will hold. That being said, I'll refer everything. Now, what's the time frame we're talking about now for my situation on Marshallville Road?
If the ordinance is written, and if it's adopted, it will become effective October 5th, as well as I think every community in Cape County except Lower Township is in the process, just as we are tonight, at looking at adopting the flood hazard maps that FEMA produced. So everybody's map is going to become effective October 5th. What that would mean is at some point afterwards, through your mortgage company might do research to find, you know, they do mapping periodically, or if you refinance your home or you purchase a new home, so for a new mortgage, usually your mortgage company will, you know, find out, oh, your property is now in a flood hazard zone, and notify you that you need to go through the process of obtaining an elevation certificate and then needing to get purchase flood insurance.
And this is all based on FEMA's projections?
Correct.
Well, I can tell you that we've been in the house for 18 years. We built the house 18 years ago, and prior to that time, we kind of surveyed the area, looked at it for 3 years to see what was happening during major storm events, and that area has never been flooded, and I don't see how it could be now in a flood zone. We're not affected by wave propagation for sure, because we're like 13 miles inland.
So that's why you're in an A zone, you're just gonna get static flooding. I mean, I'd recommend to come into the office and we can plot exactly and show you where your house is in relationship to the line, and that'll, help define exactly where you are.
Given the fact that what I said about the time frame, we're talking about roughly 20 years, if it becomes necessary, because I still have a mortgage, if it becomes necessary to procure flood insurance, now you're talking about people who are, I'll be 80 years old next week, and I still have the mortgage, and if I have to have flood insurance, you're going to be driving people out of the township. Now, I don't know if FEMA takes that into consideration or not, but it becomes a financial burden if you now are required with taxes and fixed income. It becomes a financial burden. We've talked about financial burdens earlier this evening. So that's something, but you and I will talk. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
In my little research on this issue, I came up with just what he's talking about. It essentially says, here's what FEMA has to say about it, sir. However, because of limitations of scale or topographic definition of the source maps used to prepare a flood insurance rate map, small areas may be inadvertently shown within a special flood hazard area or on any specific flood insurance rate map, even though the property, legally defined parcels of land, is on natural ground that is at or above the elevation of the 1% annual chance flood. This elevation is called base flood elevation. Such cases are referred to as inadvertent inclusions. So that would mean you would need to get a licensed surveyor to survey the ground immediately adjacent to your home. And if the elevation, the lowest elevation, is above the base flood elevation, you're out. If it's below the base flood elevation, anywhere around the house, you're in. That's my problem with K-Day Point. I'm in on the northeast corner. I'm at 7.9 feet. 8.0 is the magic number, and because I'm 7.9 at that northeast corner, and only the northeast corner, I pay flood insurance. Well, that's the way it is.
Years now, you're gonna tell me I might have to pay flood insurance?
I have people call my office, I probably get a call every 2 or 3 months where a property owner, under the current rules right now, gets a call from their mortgage, and this happens, obviously, and what I'm saying now is not for the people over in Stratford, I'm talking about the people on the mainland, that the flood hazard zone up along between Route 9 and the Parkway, there's little creeks and streams that all duck and dive in there, all along the east coast there, and then as you come up the Tuckahoe River, there's spots, and even back in off at Elmwood Avenue, and some of the development back in there, that I'll average 5 or 6 calls a year where the homeowner says, I've been living there for 20 years, and I just got a call from my mortgage company, and they said I need flood insurance, what's going on? And so that's already in existence, that's already been happening today. Just why is it happening today for these people is because with computer technology, they've digitized these flood maps, and they can see real quick, oh, that house is in the flood zone. Whereas before, if you look at the old flood maps that were paper maps, they barely had streets on them, and they were made back in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was very hard to map. You actually have to do a lot of drafting and figuring to calculate where your house is on that map. It takes a long time to do it, and it's difficult. But now with the computer technology, they can just automate it on the computer, and they just have the computer scanning to see if your house is in there. So I get a lot of calls for today, so it's not uncommon. That's why I sent notices to probably, I think it was 33 residents that they're along this line. Now, some of the people that I sent notices to, that when you look at the mapping, the map kind of touched right along the back edge of their house, kind of like what Dr. Farrell is, based on and how they produce these maps is they have planes that fly over and they shoot radar down, and they get a fairly accurate map of the elevation, probably within an inch or two in most cases where it's open area. Trees and stuff, it's not so well, but in open area, they can get fairly close to where they can interpret where this elevation of where the flood zone is. Now, when it comes up closer to the house, it gets a little fuzzier because you have shrubs near your house and small trees, so that can distort where that line goes, so where it might not, in Dr. Farrell's case, where it clipped the corner of his house, it could be just off of the corner of your house. So that's why you got to really come in and look at it real closely. I also sent those letters to people where maybe the house wasn't in the flood zone, but they had a larger detached garage, and that was in the flood zone. And I felt that it was better to notice properties in that scenario because a lot of flood insurances will send you a notice. The flood zone could be 30 feet from your house, and they'll still send you a notice because it's across your property line.
That's not legal. They can't do that.
Well, actually, by federal law, if you have a federally backed mortgage, you must carry flood insurance. However, regardless of where you're at, a mortgage company can say, we know you're not in a flood hazard area, but you need to carry flood insurance. They can require you to do it, even if you're not in a flood hazard area, to protect their investment.
You know, Paul, if I may, it seems to me like there's a political collusion between FEMA and the insurance companies, and the insurance companies are saying, oh, we're really getting hit, we paid out all this money, we need more people that have flood insurance.
It's actually not the insurance companies. Actually, most of the insurance companies, because of the flood insurance program, it's all federally backed. It's a federally backed flood insurance program. That's what they call it, the National Flood Insurance Program. Most of the policies, even though they may be written through a private insurer, it's through the federal system. And the problem really becomes is there's so many homes that don't have flood insurance that have been built in flood hazard areas, and with the massive number of storms that we have increasing every year, and the amount of claims that they have in, there's much more claims that are being paid for flood claims than what policy holders are paying. And it's a federal program. It's not a private thing where the private insurance company is just racking up the rates just to get the thing. It's actually a federal.
But the point is still there, where there's so many claims going out, there's nothing coming in, so now we want more people to pay so we can get money.
But a lot of it is because there's so many homes that are either built to the proper elevation or proper construction standard, and that's why they're suffering losses, because the storms are damaging their homes. I agree with you, your home, you've been sitting here for 20, 30 years, you're well away from the coast, but you know, I'm sure right now there's people in Houston, in that area, that they probably never saw water for 20, 30, 40 years, but they probably had 2 feet of water in their house right now.
But does anyone else want to address the Township Committee?
Can you just ask a question? Yeah. Patricia Erickson, 232 Bayview, Strathmere. I just have a question. So what does this mean? You're going to vote for what?
We're voting for the ordinance that allows you to continue to have flood insurance for those of you that are in Strathmere, and those other areas in the township that require that they have flood insurance to maintain a mortgage or to, you know.
So if you vote no, what does that mean? You would vote for it, right? But like you're talking about voting for this ordinance, but there's a possibility that you won't vote?
Yeah, we vote your flood insurance.
Okay.
If everybody in Upper Township.
Okay.
If we vote no.
Okay.
Don't want to do that.
And we're not going to take the chance because that ill affects a lot of individuals that aren't even here, and we're making sure that flood insurance is available.
Okay. My second question is with the bulkheads. The doctor said that he's going to Stone Harbor and he's going to go and take the elevation of everybody's bulkhead. I noticed on that piece of paper there's very few elevation text, and they're very below 8 foot. So what are we going and where's our timeline on? Do we have to wait for the government to come in and say that we have to raise our bulkheads?
No. Well, we being the municipal government could mandate that the bulkhead is raised
Okay.
for all the homeowners. One of the reasons why we didn't mandate that when we had an ordinance for new home and revised properties is that we were trying to be cognizant of the individuals that were already homeowners that live on Bayview. But in an effort to try and mitigate some of these, the discussion that we had this evening, I was thinking out loud as to a way of maybe accomplishing that and not making the burden so difficult on the people that own homes.
Right, because it would be
On Bayview.
a major,
Right. So that's a discussion separate from what we're doing here.
okay, so that timeline is not anywhere near what we're talking about now.
Just a rough idea, Paul, what's a linear foot of bulkhead, what's it cost? Or like our bulkhead on street ends?
I think our bulkhead was about 70 feet of
500
bulkhead.
foot,
And
500 a foot.
And we paid, I think, was it 75,000?
So it's a substantial
So about
investment to do
about $500 a foot.
Right,
So
so they have to take out the existing and put in a new?
Yeah.
No?
Inches out.
Say that again?
You go 18, up to 2 feet out from the existing bulkhead.
Yeah.
And put the new one in. But then Thailand comes knocking at your door, you want 100 feet of frontage, that's 2 feet, that's 2.
You have to pay the state for the amount of their land you take. So it's a lot of different permitting. You gotta go to Bureau of Thailand, you've gotta go to the DEP and then whatever municipality we
And
set.
that's if you already have a license for all the docks and pilings that you have out in the water.
Right, because that's only good for what, 10 years? Or is it?
The lease is annual.
The Thailand's license usually is for a 10-year period.
Title for that land, but they stopped doing that in the 1970s.
I had a friend of mine that bought a property.
Fees annual. The
6
license
boat
is
slips.
Yeah,
They went to redo their bulkhead,
yeah.
went to the state. They got a bulkhead permit and all that. They're down to 2 boat slips.
Why?
State took them away.
It could get complicated. There could be shellfish habitat. There could be other things that they could say, no, you can't have this here. It could be different.
So,
The property owner just to the south of Webster Avenue that we're going to be building, where the playground is at?
yeah.
They had to pull back their bulkhead that they had built.
When they built those houses, right?
But they actually had to pull the Velcro back
I remember
about
that.
30 or 40 feet from where it was previously, because I don't think that owner did it, but previous owners had built illegal structures out in the waterway, and they had to pull that bulkhead back significantly.
So when this all takes place, it's going to be major.
Well, I mean,
But you
tonight's
guys are gonna
discussion,
help us all, right?
we're running two different things here, okay? I mean, the discussion was originally to talk about the ordinance, okay?
Okay.
But, I allowed a lot of latitude because I know that this is of concern to individuals. So this is kind of separate. We need to get this in place. And then we need to have another discussion as to, what makes sense for individuals. And, I think the township's willing to help out in any way they can, but this is a very complicated process, and it's also a very financially impressive situation. So there has to be a way of having, we don't want to put such a burden on individuals, but, having said that, there are residents that I guess have some other thoughts that aren't on Bayview that, that are looking at this as well. So that complicated discussion has to continue, but really is not going to do much for this ordinance at this point.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I close the public portion?
I just had one quick question. You said $500 a foot. You talking about a lateral foot, or is that a specific?
Linear foot.
Well, okay.
All right, I'm going to close the public portion, entertain a motion for adoption. Would someone like to?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 13-2017.
Second.
Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 18.
Hold on one second, my thing for the discussion, I don't know my code, hold on. Put my computer back on. I don't know if this is safe or stored in your phone, but
Mine's gonna post it non-stop,
okay, go ahead.
Okay. Item number 18, under new business, Ocean City High School Soccer Booster Club request to hold a raffle, number 481, on December 8th, 2017, at yesterday's restaurant in Marmora.
Move with grant approval?
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 19, Greater Tuckahoe Area Merchants Association request to hold a raffle, number 482 and number 483, on November 18th, 2017, at the Upper Township Community Center.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 20, New Jersey Best Practices Worksheet for the calendar year 2017 and the state fiscal year 2018.
Motion to accept the worksheet?
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried. Item number 21, under unfinished business, Stephen and Margaret DeMarchi request to purchase township-owned property, Block 494, lots 1 through 15.
I did talk to Paul earlier today. If you notice in your package, they did say that they would purchase all the lots in that block 494. Previously, they had only identified maybe half of them. The only concern I had, and Paul assured me that it is below what's required for a building permit for use in the zone.
Hey, Mr. Dr. Farrell, can you guys just take that outside, because we're having trouble hearing up here, please? And there is another public discussion portion of the meeting if you have anything else you want to, or anything related to the flood as well, so go ahead.
It is below, correct, Paul?
Correct.
It's like 35,000 square feet.
Right around 30,000 square feet.
Okay. Which means it would still be the same type of sale that to an adjoining property owner, private sale, but you'd have to get an appraisal to set the minimum bid.
And they're willing to deed restricted to...
I assume they are aware of that.
Yes, yes.
How big is the property this is going to be attached to?
I think total, it'll be just under 55,000 square feet.
55 total?
Total.
Right.
That'll, bring them
So
well
make sure
into
we're
a
not coming
conforming
up-
lot.
Make sure we're not coming up with an 80,000 square foot lot.
No, but they would be,
Combined.
it would be deed restricted anyway that they couldn't.
And just to reiterate, that is not a requirement in state statute. It's just historically for, probably since I've been here, the Township Committee does not want to sell or create additional residential lots because of the significant tax burden. And that's why we deed restrict it.
So,
if you're okay with it, we would move on with, I guess the next step would be to ask for an escrow for an appraisal. You may want to identify the size of the parcels because there's so many of them. And get an estimate on the appraisal if you want to move forward.
Do we need a motion to advise the clerk to move forward with
I would
that?
suggest that, and
So
keep the
moved.
property owner involved. Yeah.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
yes.
Motion is carried.
All right, someone like to make a motion to pay the bills?
I hereby move that all claims submitted for payment at this meeting be approved and then incorporated into the full minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Would you call the roll?
Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
There are 3 municipal department reports, Animal Control Department of Public Works, and MUA report. They were available upon request tomorrow at the clerk's office, but I'll make a motion to accept the reports.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
So we've actually reached the public comment portion of the meeting in the event that someone wants to speak about any other issue that they have concerns about. And then also you can continue a discussion on, the flood maps or whatever you want. Go ahead.
Hi, Janice Connell, 1808 Commonwealth Avenue, Whale Beach. I first want to thank Paul Dietrich for his assistance. When I was purchasing my house 2 years ago, had a lot of questions. Didn't really understand the flood maps and the septic systems and all of that, so I just want to say he offered me a lot of assistance. I have a question regarding the resolution about reducing the speed limit on Commonwealth Avenue to 25 miles an hour. It says in Strathmere, does that include Whale Beach as well?
Yes.
And can you explain how that is if it doesn't say Whale Beach?
Well, as long as it's within our boundary lines, meaning to the end of Strathmere, but I understand that CIL is also looking at some consideration for the remainder of Whale Beach as well, so.
Okay,
I can't speak for CIL, but what I can tell you that this committee, when we say Strathmere, we mean end to end.
And that includes the Strathmere portion of Whale Beach.
Strathmere starts at the CL Upper Township line, and it pushes in it.
Okay, thank you. I also understand, first, I have been a safety and health professional for 36 years. I'm recently retired from DuPont, and I understand that reducing the speed limit is in effect to eliminate the need for rumble strips. I still believe that we need a resolution regarding that because there could be a chance that the county does not agree and will not reduce our speed limit. And I know that the Strathmere Improvement Association, Citizens for Strathmere, Whale Beach, and others have written letters to you and the county freeholders with information regarding why they believe these rumble strips are not appropriate for Commonwealth Avenue. And I support all of that. Rumble strips are not to be installed in residential areas. They're not to be installed where, speed limits are less than 50 miles per hour, although the state of New Jersey, I believe their threshold is 35 miles per hour. Where there are homes within 650 feet of the rumble strip, and my home is less than 30, though the range there goes from 100 to 2,000 feet from the rumble strip. There's a myriad of reasons. My issue as a safety professional is concern regarding the real problem, and that is the pedestrians, the bicyclists, the beachgoers, the kids, the parking on both sides of the street. Rumble strip aside, that is an accident waiting to happen. I sit in my living room over the summer, and I have been terrified by the number of near misses that I've seen, parents dressing their toddlers and running across the street, the cars swerving into the other lane to avoid hitting the bicyclists, the toddlers, the pedestrians, the joggers. You see it all. It's very frightening to me as a person and as a safety professional. So in my mind, the real issue is the fact that we have a hazardous condition out there. We have hazardous situations every single day, numerous times. And I think it would behoove the township to put money towards a traffic, pedestrian, bicycle study to understand what the data is around, the accidents and the accidents waiting to happen. Bringing back the rumble strip thing, if the rumble strips are installed, all I can see is you're swerving into the other lane to avoid bloodshed, and you hit the rumble strip and you instinctively swerve back, and and then you have a real accident. And so, as a safety professional, I am definitely for rumble strips where they are appropriate, and I'm definitely for safety. And so my suggestion would be to have a study done and get some data-driven decisions around what would be the most appropriate resolution to the issue at hand, and that really is the safety of the pedestrians, the safety of the cyclists, the safety of everyone. One other point I'd like to make, I appreciate that Paul's letter supported the fact that we don't need rumble strips on Commonwealth. It went to Dale Foster. I believe that letter should go directly to the freeholders, since Mr. Foster is in support of rumble strips on Commonwealth for whatever reason I can't imagine, but
Currently, it's tied to federal funding,
Yes.
meaning that the county gets federal money to repair roads. And because it's not just in Strathmere we're fighting it on Stagecoach Avenue, which really has homes as close to the road as what Strathmere does in many cases on Stagecoach here in the mainland as well. So it's not just one area we're trying to accomplish this, it's several areas in the township. And, we've been told that, it's tied to federal grant money for repairing roads and revising roads. But we just feel that it's not appropriate on lower speed limits. I have no, in fact, we had requests to remove them from Route 50 and Route 49, and I know I was one that voted not to remove them because I do think it prevents accidents in the long run for higher speeds. In the case on Commonwealth and in the case of Stagecoach, for two examples, their Stagecoach's 35 miles an hour, and they want to put them on there as well, so.
well, and I appreciate your support on this, especially since it seems to me that the purpose of the rumble strip is to avoid having distracted drivers or dozing off drivers from causing accidents. And again, all my life while I get passionate about certain things, and in our zeal to do the right thing, sometimes we inadvertently create other hazards, and that's why you need to look at the whole big picture. And I spent a lot of time on the Department of Transportation, their webpage, and search all kinds of documents. I really get into this, and the safety is what I am passionate about. And there is no data that tells me rumble strips are appropriate on Commonwealth Avenue, and obviously you agree and are supportive of that. Since this effort is linked to funding, I would suggest that in addition to the resolution that the rumble strips are not warranted, that we utilize that money for a traffic study.
It's not our money, though. It goes to the county. That's the problem.
Well, but we could suggest to them that in lieu of creating or exacerbating an already existing problem with these rumble strips, we would like to conduct a traffic study, and could they be supportive of that? Because I don't want to be the...
I think what you have to understand is that we have no real jurisdiction over that roadway, because it's a county roadway. So what you're saying is we could suggest to the county to do what you're suggesting is a study, but we could do a study and they could reject it because we don't own the road. That's what I'm trying to... That's the point I'm trying to make. We could do a study and suggest to them, but it doesn't mean they're going to do it. And so I think I'm not opposed to what you're suggesting. I'm saying that maybe what we'll do is revise or maybe send an additional letter and include the freeholders and suggest that some sort of traffic study, safety study be conducted.
But the problem is, they need to do a traffic safety study July and August on Saturday and Sunday, not in January and February.
Right.
In January and February, 45, 50 miles an hour, everybody goes that speed down there. July, August, it needs to be reduced.
And you exactly said it. You can suggest 25 miles an hour, which would get us out of the rumble strip issue, but they may reject that, and that's why I think we need the resolution that says we object to the rumble strips, or they're not warranted with definitive reasons. And I found tons of data that indicate that. And the second thing is, I didn't see anywhere where there was a data-driven decision about rumble strips on Commonwealth, other than the fact that the state of New Jersey, or the criteria is on roads where the speed limit is in excess, according to the federal, 50, but in New Jersey, 35. And to me, that meets the requirement, but it doesn't mean that immediately it should be implemented, because you have to, and again, in the documents written by the Department of Transportation, it says you need to look at just all mitigating circumstances. Just because a road meets the criteria, you need to look at the entire picture, and they specifically said bicyclists, pedestrians, parking issues, all of that.
They used no data to come up with the roads. It was just economic driven, the availability for grant money. There was no data used.
And if the federal government says 50 and the state says 35, and I'm just speculating because I don't really know the answer. We've been told that it's tied to federal funding. May well be that the federal funding says, well, your state has a higher, more restrictive code and you have to follow that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they're picking our roads that are 35 miles an hour as a criteria for that. But, you know, we certainly, listen, if we could make Stagecoach 25, we would, and it was 25, and we were told it had to be changed because it couldn't be enforced. That was a long time. It was when I first got on the Township Committee almost 20 years ago. And the same thing holds true on Commonwealth Avenue. So, I mean, we're trying to do whatever we can on our end. And, you know, we've certainly communicated with the one freeholder that used to sit on this Township Committee up until about a year ago as to our feelings about it. And, you know, we're hoping that, you know, we somehow can, you know, make some headway that way.
And I appreciate that, because quite frankly, I don't want to see any bloodshed on Commonwealth Avenue in front of my house or anywhere. But, you know, speaking to the fact that there is no data to drive a decision is upsetting, to say the least.
That's the counties, not us.
And the bottom, on the side of the coin where, you know, from where I sit, just to spend money and create a worse hazard by doing so is just unconscionable. I just don't understand that.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Bateman, 14 East Tecumseh, Strathmere. I'm speaking as president of the Strathmere Improvement Association. I don't know if Janice mentioned that she is the vice president of the Strathmere Improvement Association.
And possibly will be president someday.
Exit. I just wanted to follow up from last Township Committee meeting when Mr. Dan Lee from Whale Beach spoke about the rumble strips, and he and Jason Lombardi did attend the freeholders meeting the next evening. Unfortunately, he's traveling for business overseas, so it's hearsay, but I'll just recap his experience. He thought that Mr. Desiderio was sympathetic. In fact, he asked him to stay afterwards, and he informed them that Sea Isle had passed a resolution. But he got pushback, and Mr. Pearson, he got pushback from Mr. Foster, and it deteriorated into, well, if you're not for rumble strips, you must be for death and fatalities. And he cited some fatalities on other county roads that are really not fair comparisons. So we very much feel that Paul's letter was effective in saying which roads we were okay with, but that letter went to Dale Foster, and we know that he doesn't really want to hear this. And it sounds that the reality is it's an economic decision, not a safety decision. So we are asking again for a resolution clearly stating, and it doesn't just have to be Strathmere, certainly include any affected areas in Upper Township. Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to omit that, I just wasn't aware of that. Anecdotally speaking, yesterday I was driving in from Sea Isle to Strathmere around 8:45, 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's fall, but it was bumper to bumper traffic both sides. And I thought, I'm going to keep track of how many times I go out into the middle lane. This is as much research as some others have done.
That's more than the county.
Okay, well, I paid attention. And I don't know distances, but the first thing was a person in a giant SUV opened the car door into the traffic lane and stuck her leg out. So boom, I'm in the middle lane. Not too long after that, as Janice mentioned, someone got out, let their kids out, which I see happen all the time. They let them out on the dune side. The kids don't want to stand in the itchy grass with the bugs, and they start wandering around to see what mom and dad are doing. They're out before you know it, and there I am again. And then it was a great weekend to bike. And the bicyclists, many conform, but many love to ride side by side in 3 and 4. And that was 3 times before I got to the trailer park. When you throw in turtle season, when we're all stopping to move turtles, you may get everybody behind you to stop, and then the person has to go in the direction the turtle's going, and then you have the people coming that way. And to be brutally honest, we all know we are just waiting for terrible things to happen out there. And I think it behooves us to make this known and to publicly acknowledge that by not addressing the real issue of too many cars on that road, parking on both sides of the road, and I got to tell you, I'm never sure what speed I'm supposed to be doing because the signs change frequently, and right now there are even signs, this is not you guys obviously, but it's very confusing because the signs change and then they forget to change some signs. So you can go from 25 to 40 to 35 to 40 right now on that road. So lowering the speed limit to 25 is a wonderful idea. I don't know who's going to enforce that. You cannot go above 25 in June, July, August, and September because you would kill somebody, because there is somebody always out there, and it's impossible. There's a lot of truth to the speed will be determined by the road conditions. So lowering the speed limit is admirable and certainly support that, but I don't think it's enough. And I think Janice made a really good case for rumble strips as contributing to yet another hazard. So I would call on you, and I think that Dan's experience, to wrap this up, at the freeholder meeting really underscores what we're saying. We come here as homeowners, you all listen to us, you respect us. I don't think that he was treated that way when he called the freeholder's office or when he appeared before the freeholders. So we do need your help, and we do need you to address this with the county freeholders. Thank you.
Thanks. Can we have it on our agenda for the next meeting, a resolution?
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's good to hear that Jeff Pearson and Lenny Desiderio are certainly. All right, hold on. So the 2 freeholders, one from Upper and one from Sea Isle.
I can't speak for Mr. Pearson because I only know what Mr.
I know, but I kind of have spoken with Mr. Pearson, and he certainly understands the situation.
And he lives off a Stagecoach. That's going to affect his life.
Right. And just to use a comparison, Stagecoach is a year-round issue with kids playing out in front of their homes all the time. So although it's not the same comparison as Commonwealth, we're dealing with the same issues on the mainland as well. So, we're trying to do both, but I'm not opposed to doing a resolution to the effect of continuing to support what we're trying to do, either lower the speed limit or eliminate the rumble strips to any roads that have less than 50 mile an hour speed limit on it.
Well, I think we need to can you give us a list of your research you did against rumble strips?
What, you would like the data?
Yes. No, you don't have to do it right now. If you could leave it with our clerk later, so we could actually put that in some of that in our resolution.
Yes.
Does someone want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Carried.
See what we can do with discussions with all the freeholders. I'll reach out to the freeholder director and see what I can accomplish. Yes, sir.
Yes, Virgil Procacino, 204 Neptune Avenue in Strathmere. We have a problem on Neptune Avenue with speeding traffic. It's a 4-block street. There's somewhere around 21 children in that 4-block area, depending on the weekend. Earlier in the summer, I spoke with Paul Dietrich about it, and he had some signs posted, children playing. That didn't have any effect. So some of the residents purchased speed bumps, private speed bumps, and put them out on various spots on Neptune Avenue. That didn't go over well with the township, and I think it was Scott Morgan had them removed.
Well, weren't they given back one time?
Yeah, they were given back.
And then they put them back out?
Yeah, well, they were not put back after they were removed the first time.
Yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Not to contradict you, but they were.
Well, we didn't put them back. So one of the neighbors did, okay. But what I'm asking now, is there any update on any solution to that issue? I mean, the cars speed down there, they do the same speed as Commonwealth Avenue. It's a 4-block stretch, there's no stop signs, there's no reason to stop. If you're hunting for a parking space, you're zipping around those blocks. And we're looking for some kind of solution to the problem.
Paul and I actually are both working on a potential solution, as I stated on Saturday's meeting, working with a company called All Traffic Solutions to come up with some equipment that will give us the data that I know Committeeman Barr has discussed in the past to develop enough data to provide us with a potential solution, whether we go with speed humps or whatever the solution may be. And that's what we're currently looking into. So we have something to support either putting a speed hump in or whatever the solution may eventually be. We want something to back that solution. And we absolutely understand your concerns, and they're valid concerns, and we're just as interested in those issues as well.
And obviously, as we move forward of analyzing the data, we know that we don't want to try to do the data now. We are going to have to wait until the beginning part of at least May, closer to Memorial Day, early part of June, to start getting some data that is realistic, because it wouldn't be fair to go out there and measure.
Of course.
Data now.
But you will find speeding vehicles just today even.
But you're not going to see them under the same conditions of pedestrian, their interaction with pedestrians.
Of course.
Really, you need to see it as it's.
Right, and we're not saying that speed bumps are the solution. That was stop signs may do the job.
And that's why we want to obtain the data, so that we can come up with the best solution to solve the problem. And not just keep throwing things up on the wall and hope, let's hope this one works. And do some.
Thank you.
Did you want to address the Township Committee as well?
Yeah, I just had a comment on...
All right, we need your name, though. Your name and your address.
Might go to your worst Peters.
What's that?
We need your name and address before you start.
Eric Kiar, I'm at 113 South Commonwealth.
Okay.
There are already two 25-mile-an-hour speed limits on Commonwealth from Webster north. One posted by the Bridge Commission and one that's north of the blinking yellow light. And that's there 365 days a year. Don't change it, nothing. Same, 25 miles an hour. Going south, they have 30 miles an hour, which they've just changed to 35. Sea Isle City has 25 mile an hour from 9th Street south. 25 miles an hour, 365 days a year. No rumble strips. So I don't know why we're even talking about rumble strips. If you've got a town right down the road that has 25 mile an hour zone, 365 days a year.
Is that on the Well Beach section? I don't think so.
That goes from 19th Street as far as you want to go in Sea Isle.
That's all the way.
25 miles an hour.
It's because it's 25 miles.
No rumble strips.
Well, from what I understand, and we've talked about it our last meeting, the 25 mile an hour speed limit is based on the amount of residency and the build-up volume. As soon as you get a little bit northern of 19th Street, obviously there's less houses.
Well, I have no problem with, once you get past Whale Beach and you're in that open area, let them do what the county wants to do. It's 40 now, it was 35, 40 is fine. But in the residential area, which is very, very similar to Sea Isle City, why do we have to have 35 now? And Sea Isle stays 25, 365 days a year. They ought to give the same consideration to Strathmere / Whale Beach. for 25 mile an hour without a rumble strip. I agree, the rumble strips are disastrous, especially for bikers. You're going to have bikers all over the place. If you put a rumble strip there, right now, the bikers go down the road, that white line on the right-hand side, that's their guide. They won't move off that white line. They can have a whole 5 foot on the side open with no parking, and they'll ride that white line. So if you put rumble strips in there, they're going to be all over that road.
Just let me clarify, we are not putting any rumble strips in.
Yeah.
It's the county, okay? We don't want rumble strips.
Okay. But like I said, don't put the rumble strips in the request. Okay.
You're preaching to the choir, but I just want to make it very clear that it isn't the township that's putting rumble strips in.
Okay.
It's a county road.
All right.
They want to put rumble strips in.
But also, in your comments, Strathmere/Whale Beach should have the same considerations from the county as what Sea Isle has on Landis Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Isley, live over here on Old Tuckahoe Road, and while rumble strips may not be the answer, we have 2 of them on our street, and they're strategically located because there's an autistic child on one end, and on the other there's young kids. However, I've talked to Paul, and there's no rumble strip in front of the soccer fields right in front of my house. And by the time that they get over those 2, they get up to about 50 miles an hour. And I'm afraid that there's going to be an incident where there's kids that are hurt just going out and getting to the car. Now, the Township Committee a number of years ago put no parking signs on one side, which greatly improved the safety, because normally kids can't cross the street because their parents are over there, but there are a few people that instead of coming this way and seeing the sign, they come in this way and they can't see the sign, so they park. Anyway, rumble strips are not the answer, but I think that Paul and I agree that there possibly needs to be a 3rd one in front of my house, just because it's located in the center part of where all the soccer field hockey is. So
You want a speed bump?
Speed bump. Yeah, well, that's different than the rumble strip.
Yeah, no, I agree. Rumble strips won't work there.
Right. They're the ones that go down the center of the center of the highway, or where you cross over.
Yes, we don't need those on there.
Which, by the way,
we get enough noise on the weekend when the soccer team's over there, but I'll live with that.
Pass somebody? It doesn't.
The second thing I have is I want to thank you for approving tonight the raffle for the Greater Tuckahoe Area Merchants Association. I've been the chairman of the scholarship committee for longer than I like to remember. My hair was a different color, but over the course of the years, we've issued over $185,000 out to students that live within the boundaries of the Greater Tuckahoe Area Merchants. And the negative part to that is if you look at what these kids are majoring in, there's not a job around here for them. I talked to the mother of one the other day. He majored in robotics. He's now working up at Groton, Connecticut on the nuclear subs. And actually, the 14th of October, she's going up because they're going to be commissioning a new nuclear sub. So it's a positive point, and we thank you very much for supporting us.
Thanks, sir.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for your comments this evening. They're always greatly appreciated.
I'm sorry, when is the playground going to begin in this week?
That project was authorized to go out to bid. It's going out to bid October 17th, and so we'll have the bids back in October, and then it'll be constructed in the spring.
We'll be ready for the summer, hopefully.
Anybody else? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Coggins to read the motion to go into executive session.
I hereby move that the resolution be incorporated into the minutes authorizing the Township Committee to enter into executive session for the following matters pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act. The matters are personnel, contract negotiations with Quality Asset Recovery, request for access to Block 350, Lot 12, and the New Jersey Highway Authority, safety and security, and litigation for affordable housing, Hope versus Upper Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, and litigation for tax appeals. I also include in my motion the estimated time and the circumstances under which the discussion in closed session can be disclosed to the public as follows. It is anticipated that the matters discussed in closed session may be disclosed to the public upon the determination of the Township Committee that the public interest will no longer be served by such confidentiality. With respect to employment and personnel matters, such discussions will be made public if and when formal action is taken or when the individuals involved consent that it can be made public. With respect to contract negotiations, such matters will be made public when negotiations have ceased and there is no longer a reason for confidentiality. With respect to litigation matters, such discussions will be made public when litigation is complete and the applicable appeal period has expired.
Second. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Coggins?
Yes.
Mr. Corson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Palumbo?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Have a great evening, everyone. Drive safely home.